and we continue our series on the new music, part 11. To begin this 11th article on the new music, I look back on the Om choirs in Auroville, the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, and the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in New Delhi. During January and February, the new music began to descend in waves of extraordinary power and sweetness. The first vast opening came in Auroville, with the collective body receiving one sound with infinite reverberations as we chanted Om. Melodies within melodies, harmonies built upon harmonies, all spontaneous, unrehearsed, sung in the sacred ambiance of Savitri Bhavan. The Om choirs in the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, New Delhi, were very special experiences. We gathered at 6 a.m. each morning and 6:30 p.m. each evening, practiced warming exercises for the voice, and then, in the meditation hall where we met, a sound, one can only call it heavenly, seemed to well up from the soul in answer to the force that was descending. There were overtones on overtones, produced naturally as a result of the perfect blending of voices. The sense of the small I thinned, and one no longer felt that he or she was singing individually, but understood, without the intervention of the mind, the dawning realization of a great choir, a group soul of aspiration, calling down the music from its heavenly abode and receiving it in its splendor and beauty into the very cells of the body. In a recent letter, after my return to Pondicherry, Tara Johar wrote, quote, "Every Saturday, I have a meeting with the teacher trainees, who are about 40 in number. Yesterday, I had a meeting with them, and I was 5 minutes late. By the time I reached, they were deep into the Om choir, and it made me very happy. So the seed has been sowed, and I hope it will flower." The first sentence of Sri Aurobindo's book, The Mother, has come to me often before and after the chants of the Om choir. Quote, "There are two powers that alone can effect in their conjunction the great and difficult thing, which is the aim of our endeavor, a fixed and unfailing aspiration that calls from below, and a supreme grace from above that answers." In my last evening with the Om choir in the ashram, we were given a demonstration of the Russian flat bells designed by Alexander Zhikarev, who worked for 15 years to perfect their sound. The flat bells are a collective instrument, and the more people who play them together, the greater the vibration of an incredible harmony that resounds throughout a given space and within the body. Although the voice is the purest of all receptacles, as Mother has written, We can understand that the new music is descending through all channels and instruments open to its beauty and plenitude. When Alexander played the bells on a boat in the middle of a river, masses of people lined the banks on both sides. When he played the bells on the top of a hill, he noticed that people gathered in concentric circles all the way down the hill. Here is another article shared with me by Rich Heffern, his interview with Aino Johanni Rautavaara, conveying the inexpressible. Rich Heffern interviewed the composer by phone in his home in Helsinki, Finland. Music reviewers talk of the sense of religious awe, wonder, and enchantment in your music, which is very popular in this country because of its spiritual nature. Where does this spiritual influence come from? Rautavaara. I've always been fascinated with the metaphysical and with religious texts. Vigilia, a large choral work I wrote recently, uses texts from the Russian Orthodox Church. I have used many Roman Catholic texts also, as well as shamanistic tales from the Finnish national epic, the Kalevala. Composers, of course, have always been interested in these kinds of subjects and religious texts, but I don't use, like my good friend Arvo Pärt does, many Eastern meditative texts. My influences are more Western European. Your admirers say that your music is about the heart and spirit, and that by contrast, contemporary music has become so discordant and intellectual that it is hard to listen to. Rautavaara. Music is always in crisis. There was a crisis in the 1950s when I started to compose. The new methods of modernism, 12-tone technique and serialism were advancing. I was interested in those, of course. My early symphonies used serialist techniques. But in the end, this way of composing was not my way. It wasn't the road for me to follow. Though the 12 tempered tones of serialism are the vocabulary of the century just past, my solution was to seek for a synthesis of modernism and tonal harmony. I still use the 12-tone technique. My 7th symphony, Angel of Light, opens with a series of mostly minor chords, with always a new harmony in each bar, but the root notes of those chords follow a 12-tone pattern. This kind of synthesis of two different techniques is very typical of my creation. I often read critics who say Rautavaara has been using so many different styles in his output. I have certainly used many compositional techniques, but always inside one personal style. Style and technique are different things. Rich Heffen. You have said that music is composed organically, that it grows by its own laws and genetics. How does that work? You start with a phrase or melody, and the whole work is there, like a tree is there in the acorn? Rautavaara. It happens in 3 steps. First, almost always, there is some kind of atmosphere or mood, which is for me the original idea or impetus behind a work. I can find it in a poem, a text, or a memory. Quite often, in improvising at the piano, an idea comes to mind and it starts to grow. That idea dictates to me the choice of certain musical material, which corresponds to the original idea, some harmonic symmetry, or certain motifs and themes. The genetic code of the piece is there from the beginning. The chosen material seems to have its own will, which I, the composer, must respect and follow. I used to say to my composition students, don't ever force your music. Listen to your music, to your first ideas. Music is full of wisdom. The second step involves environmental factors, the cultural climate of the time, the zeitgeist. For example, being Finnish influences my work, as do the things that are going on in the world. Then, third, the ability of the composer and that composer's experience in music come into play. In the end, though, the work of art is unpredictable and creates its own laws. When it's complete, then there is nothing to add, nothing to take away. When the work is performed, I am always full of admiration for it. I ask, how is it possible for this to be born? I am not able to make anything like that. It must have been somewhere, somehow in existence, even before I found it. I'm not really mother or father, but the midwife. I am just a nourishing medium for it. Rich Heffen. Your music reminds me of the natural world, a representation in music of the way nature is, the way a landscape or seascape or a cloudy autumn sky appears. One of my favorite works is Autumn Gardens. It's music that is full of peace, acceptance, and reconciliation, just like an autumn garden. Rautavaara. I am glad to hear that. For every Finn, nature is very close, and there is so much of it here. Nature, of course, is an organic thing. The genesis of music reminds me of how nature works. I see in my own garden how the trees and flowers grow. My compositions grow and build in the same way. A composer is not so much an architect as a gardener. Rich Heffen. Much of the new spiritual music is coming from the Baltic countries like Finland, Estonia, or Latvia. Why? Rautavaara. This part of the world is a crossroads of religious and cultural traditions. I belong to the Lutheran Church, but one of my key formative experiences as an artist happened when my parents took me to Karelia, which then still belonged to Finland. After the Winter War of 1939, it became part of Russia. In the middle of Lake Ladoga is an island called Valam, with an Orthodox monastery on it. We went to the island and stayed overnight in the monastery. I had never seen Orthodox churches and services before. It was strange to me. When we came to the island, I saw the onion domes and towers on the chapels, painted with bright colors. The bells started to ring for the morning matins. The universe seemed to be full of bright sounds and colors. There were monks with dark beads and dour countenances, icons with saints' faces, and candles burning everywhere. The sensuous mystery of the place made a profound impression on me. To be continued.